Imagine, for a second, a beautiful mahogany dresser inside a 19th century Virginia plantation house, and sitting right on top is a small, cobalt blue bottle. You know, it looks completely innocent. Maybe it's holding rose water or some simple medicine. But for 17 long years, this little bottle held a massive secret. It held death, all measured out, drop by calculated drop. And this is the story of the woman who used it. So picture this. It's 1889. A 64-year-old woman named Delilah Morgan is on her deathbed, and she's speaking to an abolitionist pastor, Reverend Thomas Butler. And the story she tells him, well, it's something that just defies belief. She confesses to a long, methodical, and patient campaign of vengeance against the very family that had once owned her.
7. You heard that right. That's how many people she confessed to killing. And this wasn't some single act of rage. No, this was one by one by one, over almost 2 decades. The entire bloodline of the Whitmore family, from the master of the house all the way down to his last unborn grandchild.
Her plan started way back in 1844, and it didn't end until 1861, right on the brink of the Civil War. Now just let that sink in for a second. 17 years of this single-minded, calculated purpose, all while she was living under the same roof as the people she planned to kill. So you gotta be asking, how in the world did a 19-year-old enslaved woman pull this off? How did she become one of history's most patient and effective serial poisoners? And maybe more importantly, why? What could possibly drive someone to do something so extraordinary? To really understand her, we have to go back to the very beginning. Her secret all started with a deep, profound trauma, a series of events that would completely transform a young woman into, well, an instrument of justice. Or murder. It really depends on how you look at it. Okay, to really get a grip on what Delilah did, we have to travel back in time to Ashland Plantation in 1844. We need to see the world she lived in, not the pretty version on the surface, but the brutal reality for the 90 enslaved people who worked there. So the Whitmores, they had this public image, right? They were seen as kind, Christian masters. They threw these fancy parties. They were pillars of Richmond society. But for the people they owned, that was all a facade. It was hiding this brutal system of absolute power, a world where there was zero legal protection from any kind of atrocity. And this is what set the whole thing in motion. In less than a single year, Delilah's mother was raped by her enslaver, forced to give birth to his child, and then had to watch as that 3-day-old baby was murdered on his direct order. Utterly broken by grief, she took her own life. And it was Delilah, just 19 years old, who found her mother's body. You have to imagine, in that moment, something inside her just snapped. Delilah knew that any kind of immediate violent revenge would just be suicide. So she chose a different path. She took all that grief, all that rage, and she channeled it, not into a fiery outburst, but into a cold, meticulous, long-term plan. She decided to weaponize her position. You see, her main weapon wasn't even the poison itself. It was the mask she wore, the mask of absolute devotion. She made herself so trusted, so indispensable to the Whitmore family, that nobody could ever suspect her. She took the intimacy that was forced on her as a house servant and turned it into the perfect tool for their destruction. For 3 solid years, she did nothing but prepare. I mean, meticulously. She used what she'd learned about deadly plants from a visiting pharmacist. She cultivated her own secret garden of poisons. She got control of the family medicine cabinet, taught herself to read better using the master's own books, and she just waited, watching them, learning their weaknesses. So by 1847, with all her preparations done, Delilah was ready. She was about to begin the systematic takedown of the entire Whitmore bloodline. And it was a campaign that would unfold with chilling precision for the next 14 years. Each death was really a masterpiece of deception. Master Augustus, her mother's rapist, he was target number 1. He had a weak heart, so Delilah was tasked with giving him his digidalis medicine. She just slowly upped the dose until his heart stopped. For his wife, Sarah, she used compounds that made it look exactly like kidney failure. For the son, Robert, liver failure that everyone blamed on his heavy drinking. She spaced the deaths years apart, used different methods every time, making sure no one ever saw a pattern. And then came the final act. She poisoned the last son, William, and then his pregnant wife, Elizabeth, inducing a fatal hemorrhage. The doctor? He just chalked it up to the stress of her husband's sudden death. And just like that, only weeks before Virginia would cede from the Union, Delilah's 17-year mission was finally complete. In the chaos that followed as the war broke out, Delilah just walked away from the plantation. But her story, believe me, it doesn't end there. In fact, the biggest questions about her legacy were still yet to come. She actually made her way to Ohio and lived for the next 28 years as a free woman, working as a paid domestic servant. And she never said a word about her past, not until the very end, when she decided her story needed to be told, that it needed to be on the record. And through all those years of freedom, she kept one memento, that small cobalt blue bottle. Was it a trophy? A terrible burden? We'll never really know. But after she died, chemical analysis confirmed its contents. It was the physical proof of her impossible 17-year secret. Today, that very same bottle sits in a museum, and the little label next to it calls it an artifact of enslaved resistance. And that raises a really important question about how we choose to remember history. I mean, by any legal definition, she was a serial murderer. But can what she did also be seen as a form of resistance? Let's be real. The legal system of her time offered Delilah nothing. For the rape of her mother, for the murder of her infant brother, there was no court, no law, no justice to be found. She was considered property. So the final question her story really forces us to wrestle with is a tough one. In a system that provides absolutely no justice, can an act of murder become its own form of accountability?